You are now watching the True Mets Talk podcast live stream. We will be going live shortly. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe to the channel.
Shallow right field, stumbling start for Stewart. It's thrown to deep left field by Alvarez. He's homered in 4 straight games for the second time. He's homered in 4.
What's up, Mets fans? It's your boy CP, and we are live here on a beautiful Thursday afternoon. It's approaching, actually, it is 4 o'clock on the dot here on the East Coast, and we are here to talk New York Mets baseball on this lovely but yet boring off day after we've had such a wild roller coaster of the last few days of emotions, of obviously the loss that happened in Atlanta. Now we have the postponement. We'll be talking about that. We'll be talking about our beloved New York Mets and how we still, right, according to my title of this stream, control our own destiny. The New York Mets still have this right in their hands. They are able to clinch in Milwaukee. We'll talk about that, upcoming scenarios. We'll talk about it all here on this stream. Please smash those thumbs up buttons for me if you are in the chat. I understand some people may still be off of work or just getting off of work, whether you're here in the live chat, you join later, or whether you're on replay, watching this on replay. Please smash those thumbs up buttons. Subscribe to the channel. If you are not subscribed yet, make sure you subscribe. Well on our way to 1,000 subscribers, kind of hovering there between 990 and just above. So definitely want to get there as soon as possible to get to that 1K. I definitely appreciate you all's help. And follow me over on X and Instagram at CPNYSports. Dropping new content daily, player spotlight series previews just like this one. I definitely appreciate that. But most importantly, this is an interactive stream. I want to get your thoughts and opinions as viewers, so make sure you're hitting that live chat. And as always, we will prop up some comments along the way while still maintaining the flow of the discussion that we have to talk about in this video. Again, this is the most beautiful thing. Even though you lost game 1 in Atlanta, the most beautiful thing to come out of that is that the Mets still control their own destiny as they head to Milwaukee. They took off this morning. They landed safely in Milwaukee. No rain, no weather, no anything. According to Mets reporters, it's beautiful, 70 degrees out there in Milwaukee, and should be great weather for baseball this weekend. I'll be in Milwaukee this weekend to cheer on our New York Mets. I'll be live in the stadium on Saturday and perhaps even on Sunday. That is TBD. Would love to go to that third game of the series, especially if our Mets take the first 2. But if you all missed it on the channel, last night I dropped another player spotlight video. I've been doing a lot of these recently. I've done Francisco Lindor, Tyrone Taylor. Next up on my list is probably either Luis Angel Acuna or Edwin Diaz, maybe even Jose Iglesias. We'll see. But I did a player spotlight video on Mark Vientos. If you missed that, make sure you go check that out as soon as you're done watching this stream. The link's going to be in the description of this live stream down below. Make sure you go smash those thumbs up buttons on that video as well. I definitely appreciate that. Kind of taking you all through the numbers of Mark Vientos by the month, kind of giving you all the story and the rundown of Mark Vientos from this past offseason before the JD Martinez signing, then after, and then in season, obviously, when he kind of started off in AAA and then got sent back down there in late April. So going through the whole story of that. But again, links in the description down below. Check out all the content. I definitely appreciate it. And make sure you guys are hitting those thumbs up on all the videos and subscribing to the channel as well. Again, the push to 1,000 is on, and I hope to get there after or right around game 162, should the games matter in Atlanta come Monday. But again, we're going to talk about all of that. Live chat poll is up. I asked you all, would you start Luis Severino in this Brewers series coming up in game 3, right? Especially with the last 2 days off? Or would you wait and potentially give him another crack at it in Atlanta should those games matter? Make sure you go ahead and vote in the live chat poll. We'll discuss that. And let's get into some comments here. Ken is saying, don't trust Severino versus Atlanta. Doug is taking it day by day, but he also doesn't trust Sevy in Atlanta. We got Ethan checking in. We got John from Pure Adrenaline Sports checking in. We got Daniel, Oliver, 7 subs away to 1,000, only 7 to go. Please smash on that subscribe button. Definitely, I appreciate that, Ethan. And make sure you subscribe, as Oliver is saying as well. Okay, let's get into the meat and bones of this actual live stream. I know I wasn't available yesterday. I dropped the video. I pre-recorded that player spotlight on Mark Vientos, but we have to talk about this debacle, this blunder that seemingly the Braves and the Major League Baseball, both of these organizations kind of conjured up to allow us to not watch baseball for the last 2 nights, right? Obviously, it was a 5-1 loss. We won on the post game. Rob and myself. He did a great Mets Talk Live. Once the postponement hit, it turned in from a pregame to a Mets Talk Live. Make sure you go check that out. He'll actually be live on his channel in just about an hour after I wrap up here. But this is a tale of a lot of things here, right? I wrote shame on the MLB because really the reason and the people, the organization to blame here for this happening is definitely Major League Baseball. Now, obviously, you all have seen the news articles and the clips and whatever of these reporters basically making it known that if the Braves had wanted to, if they wanted to change locations and if they wanted to move that Wednesday start time up, they would have done so. They had the opportunity to do so. But again, do I blame the Braves organization for doing it? Yes, because we all wanted to watch baseball. And by the way, this whole entire situation, again, might be a blessing in disguise for the New York Mets. Unfortunately, again, I have to put this out of the way because obviously we're praying for everybody in terms of that's actually affected by this weather down in Georgia, Florida, wherever, right? This storm is hitting. But we're talking about this in a baseball light. Obviously, we want to make sure those people are okay and out of harm's way. That's first and foremost. But the situation here in terms of the actual series and the Mets and the Braves and this whole playoff race in general, it's unfortunate. And what seemed unfortunate at the time for the Mets, because obviously we had the scenarios of taking 2 of 3 and clinching in Atlanta. Obviously, that was kind of grim, I guess you would call it, after game 1, because you'd have to face Chris Sale, the Cy Young runner-up, or not the runner-up, but the front runner of the Cy Young in game 2, with how bad they looked against Spencer Schwellenbach, and then you'd have Max Fried in game 3. And we'll talk about why they definitely, sidestepped Max Fried, but the Braves might be making their decisions in terms of their rotation kind of alignment in a crazy way and taking some risks by having Chris Sale not pitch against the Royals and saving him potentially for games that might not even matter if the Mets take care of business in Milwaukee, but we'll get into that here in just a second. But obviously the Braves didn't want to do this. And do we blame them for not wanting to do this? Absolutely not, because, it's a day game versus a night game. Their fans on a weekday are going to obviously show up and support after work, presumably, depending on their schedules. The large majority of people who work regular 9 to 5s, they can make those night games. If you move up a start time, right, like the Braves could have done to avoid the weather on Wednesday, because Thursday was a wash. Everybody knew that game was getting canceled, bar none. No discussions about that. But if you move up the game on Wednesday in such a crucial series for the Atlanta Braves, where they need to either sweep or take 2 of 3 to be right there with the Mets, of course, you're not going to want to advocate for pushing a start time up and potentially losing tens of thousands of fans that would have otherwise been there. But the main blame here in this situation has to be Major League Baseball, because whether the Braves want to do it or not is up to their discretion. Major League Baseball, Rob Manfred, and the people, the team that's in charge of this decision from the top at the MLB could have basically made the final call and the ultimate call. And guess what? They did not intervene. They let the Braves make their final decision, and that's what it was. And for them to sit there and cancel the game at the 19th hour, the last minute on Wednesday, it was like 5:30 or like 5:15, somewhere around there, a couple hours before game time, for them to have the Mets sitting there and waiting if this game is going to be played or not. where if you made the decision before, a couple hours prior, right, knowing what the schedule was and what the weather was, they could have been already on their way to Milwaukee, but you had them wait there until the 19th hour, and then they had to go out and fly the very next day, which was today, to Milwaukee. So again, Major League Baseball, shame on them for absolutely not stepping in. But again, on the flip side of things, as we kind of go through the stream and go through the different scenarios, this could be a little bit of a positive advantage in terms of the scheduling that the Mets could use here moving forward going into Milwaukee. We got Steven entering in the chat here, pitch Sevy in the Brewers series game 3. We'll talk about that here in just a second, Steven. Obviously, the very few of you all who are making your voices known here in this chat right now are basically telling me that you don't want to see Sevy against Atlanta, and I do not blame you whatsoever. But again, make sure to vote in that live chat poll, and hopefully my audio is sounding okay. If at any point you do not hear me, make sure you go ahead and let me know, and I'll try to fix that for you all, because we all know technology, especially during these weekdays, could definitely have a little bit they could be a little bit of a nuisance. So hit those thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, all that good stuff. And please let your thoughts and opinions known in the comment section down below. Again, I want to toss up as many comments as possible for you all to get your thoughts and opinions off on. So we have here some different scenarios. This is really the outlook here. And this is where we're going to kind of get into the scenario game of what might transpire before we get into this actual series preview before the Brewers and the Mets kick things off tomorrow. Again, just made my feelings known about the MLB. I understand that they wanted to wait. They wanted the Braves to make their own decision for selfish reasons or not, right? The Braves decided not to move the game up. They wanted the ticket sales. They wanted their fans in the ballpark. Okay. But again, logistically, looking at the Mets travel schedule, and I get that the Braves should not be concerned about the Mets travel schedule. When you have to go to Atlanta, then you have to go to Milwaukee, then back to Atlanta, and then if you clinch a playoff spot, either back to Milwaukee or off to San Diego, depending on which spot you clinch, this is a lot of travel for the New York Mets, and that's something that they're going to have to possibly deal with here. So this is the scenario here in Milwaukee, right? Plain and simple, these are your updated wild card standings, and we'll be watching closely to the game tonight that is being played by the San Diego Padres and the Los Angeles Dodgers at 10:10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, because, well, obviously that division is still not over, and the Padres have the opportunity, right, depending on what happens with the Dodgers' next series against Colorado, to overtake them and clinch a first-round bye with the Philadelphia Phillies. Now, obviously the Brewers, we don't know how they're going to be approaching this series. They're pretty much locked into that third spot in the NL, so they cannot go down and they cannot go up. We'll see how they approach this series. But again, this is Major League Baseball. There is, 27 outs to get, 9 innings to play. And no matter who's up there, whether the matchup is advantageous, whether they're regular starters or not, you still have to get the job done. And this is the common theme of this stream and how the Mets control their own destiny. You got to get the job done. These are your scenarios on the Mets clinching in Milwaukee to make those Atlanta games not meaningful anymore. And Ethan is pointing out also, we saw a lineup thrown out there by the Mets in case the game was going to be played, whether that was strategically to sort of let Mets fans know that Lindor is going to be back for the Milwaukee series, or whether they actually thought, that game was going to be played on Wednesday. We did see a lineup card with Francisco Lindor in it, batting leadoff, hitting leadoff, and playing shortstop, which is absolutely tremendous news. And now, as Ethan is pointing out, with these postponements yesterday and today, Giants fans obviously get peace of mind not having to watch the Mets and the Giants, right? But that's a different topic. And Lindor gets the extra rest here, obviously, with the next couple days to kind of stay off of his feet, get that lower back right, and hopefully feel a lot better than he might have down in Atlanta if he made that start in that rainy weather. So field conditions, all that would have came into play, but Lindor was going to give it a go, and the lineup card reflected that. So again, If the Mets win 2 of 3 in Milwaukee, if they want to clinch, they're going to need some outside help. If the Mets sweep, they're still going to need some outside help, but the outside help dwindles a little bit. So, first scenario here, Mets win 2 of 3 in Milwaukee, and either the Braves or the Diamondbacks lose 2 of 3 in their respective series. Now, this doesn't, this wild card watch doesn't just boil down to the NL. You see here on your screen, the Braves are welcoming into Atlanta the Kansas City Royals, who just won today. The Kansas City Royals, depending on what happens with the Twins game later today, their magic number is basically 2, even if the Twins win. So, again, in terms of these teams clinching in the AL and the NL, and are they going to play their starters? Are they going to play the backups? How long are they going to play their starters? All of these variables make it a headache in order to try to figure it out. But these are the facts right on your screen at the top of the screen here. Mets win 2 of 3, and to clinch, the Braves or the Diamondbacks have to lose 2 of 3. Diamondbacks are playing the Padres after the Padres finish up with the Dodgers tonight. And then obviously, like I just said, the Braves are hosting in Atlanta. And that, I'm not sure what the weather is like in Atlanta. I didn't do the scouting report in terms of if the storm passed by that area or not, and if the field is ready to play or not. But again, if there's a cancellation in that game, at least game 1 between the Braves and the Royals, you're talking about maybe 2 double headers for the Braves in the span of 3 or 4 days. So again, all things to think about here. The second scenario is if the Mets somehow, some way, don't get the job done and they only end up taking 1 from the Milwaukee Brewers. In order for them to clinch, they're going to have to rely on the Braves or the Diamondbacks being swept. That is the only way, if the Mets come away with 1 win in Milwaukee, that they can clinch and have the Atlanta doubleheader not matter anymore, is if the Braves or the Diamondbacks get swept. Is everybody on the same page so far? Because I feel like I'm starting to lose it, but I have like enough brain power to continue on here for just a little bit in terms of explaining, these situations. It's given me a headache. I'm not sure if it's giving you all a headache, but again, we have to talk about it because it's an off day and we're not going to get New York Mets baseball until tomorrow night. So I see a couple of new people in the chat here just tuning in. Shout out to Raymond. Shout out to King. Appreciate you all. And shout out to Ricardo as well. I definitely appreciate you all being here. Again, please hit those thumbs up. Always talking with my fellow Mets fans. I definitely appreciate that. So the third situation, right? We went over the first 2. The third situation here that the Mets could go through in Milwaukee in order to not have to play meaningful baseball in Atlanta anymore would be them sweeping the Brewers and then the Braves or Diamondbacks only winning 2 of 3. This is the best scenario right here. Number 3 is what the Mets want to aim for. That's why I think it's very crucial for the New York Mets to try to sweep this series. And we talk about sweeps versus series wins. And yes, the Mets are in still, good position depending on what happens outside of their, control with the Diamondbacks and the Braves, even if they take 2 of 3 in Milwaukee. But the best scenario for them to need the least amount of help as possible is if they sweep the Brewers and then the Braves or the Diamondbacks can still win 2 of 3, but they would still essentially be eliminated. The Mets would clinch. I might have lost some people there. Did I lose anybody there? I'm just trying to make sure here because I honestly kind of lost myself there. The Mets sweep, and if the Mets sweep, if the Braves don't sweep, the Mets clinch. If the Mets sweep and the Diamondbacks don't sweep, the Mets clinch. Someone fact checked me, but pretty sure that's the case. I'm going to speak on it as if that's a fact. So again, your best scenario is if the Mets sweep the Brewers. Honestly, I hate to say it, and I know Rob's in the chat here. I know that he's a big series win proponent, as am I, but this would put the weight off of everybody's shoulders if they went in there to Milwaukee and swept this series and they only needed one game from the Royals or one game from the Padres. And again, as we talk about the outside help, that's where this game tonight matters between the Padres and the Dodgers. If the Padres win, they are going to need to try their hardest to sweep or at least take 2 of 3 from the Diamondbacks and hope for help from the Rockies in the Dodgers series because they can still clinch that first round bye. But if the Padres lose, they are going to be mathematically eliminated from the NL West division crown, but they're still going to need to take one game from the Diamondbacks because if the Diamondbacks sweep them, then they are going to be the number 1 wild card seed, and then the Padres would forfeit their home field advantage. This is very complicated. I agree with you, Ken. But I think the consensus here is that we want the Padres to beat the Dodgers tonight. I think that's the best case scenario. But again, it doesn't matter because if the Padres still lose, right, if they are confined to the wild card, they're still going to need to take one game from the Diamondbacks to clinch that home field. So that would mean the Mets, if they sweep, would be in a prime position to clinch in Milwaukee. Again, that's contingent on the Mets sweeping. That is the best case outcome for the New York Mets is if they sweep. But these are your updated wildcard standings. The Padres are currently up 3.5 on the Mets and the Diamondbacks. The Mets obviously are even, but they hold the tiebreaker with the Diamondbacks. The Diamondbacks beat the Giants last night to move back up. And then obviously with the Braves win versus the Mets last go around, the Braves kind of come a lot closer than we would be comfortable with to both the Diamondbacks and the Mets, moving only a game behind. This is crazy scenarios. I'm trying to make sense of it, and I'm trying to explain it in a way that makes sense to you all that might not be into this kind of stuff. Usually, I'm not into this stuff. I say take it one game at a time, and we'll talk about this series preview here in just a little bit. But these scenarios are wild. There's a lot of outside factors. You know, once these teams clinch, how are they going to be approaching these games? What is their game plan going to be? Are they going to play any starters at all? Are they going to play them for a certain amount of innings? There's a plethora of outside factors here at play. But the main thing is here, as we go ahead and continue to this preview, is sweep the Brewers. Please, for everybody's peace of mind, come out swinging, as Raymond's saying, win. Take it one game at a time. We'll talk about the Mets starting rotation configuration because it's still TBD, although we have a decent idea of what the Mets are going to do. Because again, if they're trying to sweep, like I'm telling you all they should, you want your best starters out there. So I got my guy LV live in the chat here. Big game CP, who is on the bump for you guys. I'll get into that here in the next slide. LV, I definitely appreciate you all checking the channel out. Make sure you guys go subscribe. LV live. LV is a Yankees fan. He talks very highly of the Mets, though. But he's also a Giants fan and a big-time New York Knicks fan, so make sure you guys subscribe to his channel as well. He does a lot of streams and a lot of videos for all of our teams, so make sure you go ahead and toss him a subscribe. Definitely appreciate you, LV, as always. The crazy thing here and the biggest headline that I saw was Brian Snitker, the Braves manager, basically being asked by the Braves reporters what they're going to do ahead of their series against the Royals. Max Fried, for sure, is starting for them game one. That is undoubtedly a fact. He is starting game one. So the New York Mets, right, they're not going to see him in that doubleheader. He was reluctant to say who was going to start games 2 and 3 against the Royals. He was not committing to Chris Sale. So, again, this is a big series for the Braves. They need 2 of 3, depending on what the Mets do, or they need the sweep. They really can't be affording many losses, if any, depending on what the Mets do. So, for Brian Snitker to go out there and basically say, you know, we don't know if Chris Sale is going to be pitching in this Royals series, I don't know. That's a big-time risk. It could pay off if the stars align for the Braves. But again, you would think that you would want your top pitchers in win-now scenarios. one thing's for certain is that if the Mets are playing meaningful baseball in Atlanta, they're going to see Spencer Schwellenbach again. They're going to see Spencer Schwellenbach. That's absolutely a fact. I think I saw someone in here before we get into this series preview. I know I'm kind of dragging this on a little bit, but we didn't get into every scenario because obviously the Mets could get swept. Obviously the Mets could only take 1 of 3, and the Braves could win 1 of 3, or they could win 2 of 3, etc. Essentially, I'm gonna pull up my messages with Rob because I kind of explained it in our chat here before I went live to make sure I wasn't crazy. If the Mets lose, and I forget who asked this in the chat to go over this scenario. I think they asked for if the Mets were going to get swept. But anyways, if the Mets lose 2 of 3 in Milwaukee and the Diamondbacks win 2 of 3, the Mets are going to have to take both games in Atlanta on Monday. Because that would mean the Diamondbacks would be 1 game ahead of the New York Mets as the Mets travel back to Atlanta for that doubleheader. If the Mets lose 2 of 3 and the Braves win 2 of 3, so we're kind of doing reverse here, the Mets would also need to take both against the Braves on Monday. So if the Mets lose 2 of 3 and the Diamondbacks or the Braves win 2 of 3, you're going to need to sweep that doubleheader on Monday because the Braves have, at that point, the season head-to-head matchup over the Mets. And obviously with the Diamondbacks in that scenario being 1 game above the New York Mets heading into Monday, in order to get that and exercise that head-to-head advantage that the Mets have over the Diamondbacks, they would need to get back to even, and they'd need to take both of those games. So again, the consensus here, I'm going to say it for the 10th time, sweep and try to get as much help as possible from the outside, although that's out of the Mets' control, because you do not want to go back into Atlanta playing meaningful baseball and needing to sweep that doubleheader. And that's exactly where we'll kind of transition into this series preview here as we're just approaching 30 minutes onto this live stream. Hopefully you all are enjoying this live stream. I know it's kind of this point of the baseball season where, you know, everybody's crossing their fingers. We're getting nervous. Or you guys are confident in the Mets and you guys aren't getting nervous. Me personally, I'm getting a little nervous. I wasn't before, at least 5 games or so ago. I'm a little nervous now. I'm not going to lie. They need to take care of business, plain and simple. But this is where the starting rotation configuration for the New York Mets matters, right? Because, you know, obviously if you sweep, you're in a good spot. And if you want to sweep and put yourselves in the best situation possible, you're going to have your best guys throw. And that would mean Sean Manaea getting the ball tomorrow to try to take game 1. Presumably, David Peterson, who was supposed to start yesterday up against Chris Sale, they haven't announced it. All the stars here next to each name have not been confirmed. Going into this series, the only pitcher that is confirmed on either side is Frankie Montas going against the New York Mets in game 1. Their game 2 and game 3 starters have not been confirmed, and the Mets still have not confirmed who they're throwing in game 1, 2, or 3. If I had to guess, they're going to throw Sean Manaea in game 1. The Mets ace, start the series off with a bang, get the win. And they're going to throw David Peterson in game 2. And if they win both games, and we're talking about a scenario where the Mets are going for the sweep, you'd probably have to throw Luis Severino in game 3. Because I think the consensus here among us, among myself, among you all, is that we don't want to see Luis Severino go up against the Braves a second time. Or maybe you do. And if you do, let us know why. Maybe he has success a second time around. I don't know. But if you're in a situation where the Mets take the first 2, you're probably going to see Luis Severino for game 3, hoping for a sweep and hoping that the Royals and the Padres take care of business on behalf of the New York Mets and we can clinch and not play meaningful baseball on Monday. And honestly, if the New York Mets clinch, I'm going to say this right now. If the New York Mets clinch in Milwaukee, there is no reason with how the MLB handled, right? With how the MLB handled this situation here, I said it at the top of the stream. If you're just joining us, I said, shame on the MLB for the way they handled this and for them not stepping in. If the Mets clinch in Milwaukee, I wouldn't even go to Atlanta if I was the New York Mets. I would say we're good on that. We're not playing that. We're not playing in those games. So I'm not sure if they have the power to do that. I'm not going to lie to you. I'm not sure if they have the power to do that. But as kind of an FU to the Braves and Major League Baseball as a whole, right? I would not even go to Atlanta. That's what I would not do. So, but one thing that we haven't talked about here with the New York Mets, and something that definitely lacked alongside the pitching against Spencer Schwellenbach in game 1 against the Braves, was the offense. The offense has to go out there and they have to stop being scared and they have to stop being timid. They have to. They need to put together competent at-bats. And again, Frankie Montas, he's 7-11 on the season. He's sporting a 4.85 ERA. We've seen him bounce around the league. We've seen him with the Athletics. We've seen him with the Yankees. Now he's on the Brewers. Again, a type of pitcher that you should be able to score runs against because he has not had tremendous success this season. The offense needs to wake up, and they need to have a better approach than what they had in Atlanta against Spencer Schwellenbach. Go out there, ask Mark Vientos what his approach was for him to get the 2 hits and to account for the only run for the New York Mets in Atlanta. I don't care what you have to do if you're the Mets offense. You have to show up. You have to show up. And you have to give these pitchers that are pitching their asses off for you to keep you in the ball game some run support. So this Mets lineup, all eyes for me are on them because they need to produce. That's first and foremost. Take game 1. I always say it at the beginning of each series. Fresh series kicking off. Fresh series incoming. What do you got to do? Take game 1. Because you don't know who the Brewers are planning to pitch in game 2 and 3. They could go with their regular rotation and maybe shorten them as kind of openers just to keep them fresh before the playoffs. Or they can throw, anybody else. They can throw guys out of their bullpen as openers and kind of try to get through the games that way. But as of right now, with what Fangraphs has up, this is how their rotation would stack up. And guess what? Colin Rea is 3-0 in his career against the New York Mets. He pitched a great game earlier this season, way back when in March. And I know this is a different Mets team, but again, he's a junk ball pitcher. He's got a slider, which is pretty damn good, and he's got a splitter as well, which is also good. You don't want to leave it up to, game 2, talking about a game 1 loss because you couldn't get the job done against Frankie Montas. The offense needs to show up. Please put some runs on the board. But again, I'm confident in the New York Mets. Everybody should be confident in the New York Mets. I know that there was a game 1 hiccup in Atlanta. I understand the offense didn't show up, and I obviously, expect them to do better. But there's no reason not to buy into and not to believe in the New York Mets right now, especially when their destiny is in their hands. They control their own destiny. So there's no reason, if you believe in this 2024 New York Mets team up until this point, at any point, you should believe in them now to get this job done and to finish it off. So these are your game 2 hypotheticals. I'm not going to say probables because these are hypotheticals, always subject to change, especially the Brewers side. You'll have Colin Rea versus David Peterson. And in game 3, depending on what happens in games 1 or 2, you'll have Luis Severino versus Tobias Myers. And Tobias Myers, again, rookie season for the Brewers, if I'm not mistaken, also a junk baller. He's got a nasty changeup. And you kind of want to avoid a situation where you didn't win games 1 and 2, and you have to see Tobias Myers. But again, I honestly, I don't want to jinx anything. I don't see the Brewers, especially with them being locked into that 3rd spot in the NL, past Frankie Montas. I don't see them throwing Colin Rea. I don't see them throwing Tobias Myers. And I just put their names up there with an asterisk because I don't know who else they would throw. I don't know who in their bullpen is suited for being an opener. I don't know any of that. So again, I could be overstepping this and kind of overthinking it. But again, coming into this series, you have to expect that they're going to throw their A guys, and it's going to be Colin Rea, Tobias Myers in games 2 and 3. So let me get into some of the comments here. I know I've been kind of talking your guys' ear off. That's what I do, though. That's what I do. That's why you guys tune in. Again, the shameless plugs. Make sure you go check out the player spotlight yesterday. I was hyping up Mark Vientos. He's having a statement season, and he is definitely a core piece for this Mets team moving forward. Whether it's at third base or whether something happens in the offseason, right, with Pete Alonso and he walks away and Mark Vientos goes to first base. Mark Vientos is going to be on this team, and he's shown us all the reasons, both defensively and offensively, why he deserves to be thought of as a core piece on this New York Mets team. I didn't think that was the case coming into the season. I believed in his bat. I didn't believe in his defense, but I explained it to you all. I gave you all the story of Mark Vientos in that player spotlight. The link's going to be in the description down below. Make sure you go check that out. If you go to the homepage, you'll also see it right in front of you if you have not subscribed yet. And if you're a new subscriber, hit the thumbs up and keep dropping those comments in the live chat. Let me get to some of the comments here. Keep it interactive before we kind of summarize our thoughts on this series. Because again, if I were to just tell you all two simple things, is that get the sweep, offense has to show up. Not really worried about the pitching. I don't know how the Brewers are going to configure their lineup. Obviously, they have some pretty good talent in that lineup. They wouldn't be leading the NL Central if they weren't a good team. We saw them way back when in March. But again, it is what it is at this point, and we're going to have to sort of speculate here before this series starts tomorrow. Let's get into some of the comments. Oliver saying, not nervous. We're good enough to win. I agree. There's no reason why us Mets fans should be nervous at this point. The goal is right in front of us. It's right in front of these Mets players. They know what they need to do. They know that they control their own destiny. And they know that the best circumstance for them to get into the playoffs without having to worry about any Atlanta games is sweeping this series. So take it one game at a time and don't get nervous now, because this is where diamonds are made. Pressure makes diamonds. And the pressure is on a little bit. The pressure is on, especially after that game 1 loss in Atlanta. The pressure is on. But again, the great teams, the teams that should be in the playoffs, this is where they make a name for themselves. And the Mets need to make a name for themselves. King says Severino needs to relax. He did kind of pitch a little timid out there in game 1 in Atlanta, right? I don't know if the nerves were getting to him. I don't know exactly what it was. The slider didn't look too sharp. The fastball location was very off, and he just looked off. He didn't look like the same Severino that we've seen for the large majority of this season. So I agree with you, King. Cindy's saying, at the very least, I wouldn't have Lindor travel back to Atlanta and then either back to Milwaukee or San Diego or LA. Well, Cindy, I agree with you. If the Mets clinch, there's no reason to go back to Atlanta at all if the Mets clinch, to be honest with you. But if they somehow don't and they're playing meaningful baseball, Lindor's going to have to travel back. Lindor's going to have to travel back. If he's good enough to play, right? If he's on the roster, he's going to have to travel back, and he's going to have to be an option for this team, hopefully starting, but at the bare minimum, off the bench, depending on how the back feels. Don't forget, Lindor told all of us that he is going to be playing with pain. He is going to be playing with discomfort. He expects that to be the case. He knows this back issue is not going to 100% heal itself in the next week or so. But it's good at least that we saw a lineup with him in it, playing the field down in Atlanta before it got postponed. That's a good sign to come for him appearing in this Mets lineup, hopefully for all 3 days. Have to play loose, 100%. D saying we will get to Montas. Oliver saying Braves are a publicly owned team. Cohen is probably going to short sell them. Oh, my goodness. Yeah. Well, the Braves also definitely held on to the start times for, business reasons and concession sales and, ticket sales and fans in the ballpark too. So, that definitely tells me that they're penny pinching a little bit. So we'll see. More comments in here. I don't think the Brewers are going to start their starters because they want to keep them injury-free. Yeah, like I said, the Brewers are already locked into that third spot. Frankie Montas is for sure going. I think they've already made that publicly known. But again, we don't know what the lineup configuration is. We don't know if we're going to see Jackson Churios. We don't know if we're going to see Willie Adames and all their starters in the lineup. Again, it's TBD. Any asterisk here on the screen on the Mets or the Brewers side is TBD. But again, after these 3 games, as you see with the text below, the Mets will be back in Atlanta for a doubleheader against the Braves on Monday, should those games matter. And we just went over the scenarios here a couple of minutes ago in like how those games would matter for the Mets. And they usually involve, the Mets only taking 1 of 3. That's the primary consensus here. Obviously, there's a lot more scenarios in which those games would matter, even if the Mets take 2 of 3 with the outside help and the outside games that we're still watching. But yeah. But yeah, we'll see here. I really do think that if the Mets take games 1 and 2, it's going to be Severino. I really do think so. And let me go ahead here into the live chat. I apologize if you hear a little bit of an echo. Let me see what you guys are saying. I got 31 votes in the chat. If you haven't voted, please make sure to vote. I asked you all, would you want Luis Severino to be starting in game 3 of this Brewers series or give him one more chance against the Braves? 71% of you all said start him against the Brewers, and only 29% said give him a revenge game opportunity and start him potentially against the Braves. So I appreciate you all making your voices heard about that. But yeah, I wanted to come up here on the off day, talk to you all about, my thoughts and feelings. I know a lot of other Mets content creators are going live. Rob will be live here in just about 35 minutes, I believe. You got Till Mets Do Us Part. Probably some other content creators that are going live to talk Mets on the off day. Rob had a great stream yesterday that I was kind of, in the car listening in on when he was talking about the postponement and his feelings towards the postponement. And I think the consensus here is that the Braves definitely, for selfish reasons, didn't move any start times up. They didn't change locations because they wanted to play in front of their home crowd. They wanted to play in as many, in front of as many fans as possible. And they should be allowed to do that. But when you have this kind of stretch of games and meaningful games at that, I truly think that Major League Baseball should be stepping in, and they should not allow, that team that's in charge of the decision making, because they're the home team, to have the final say. They have to step in and they have to do what's right for both teams and step in. And let me just put this out there as well, because I didn't really touch on this on that slide. I saw a couple of Braves reporters. I think Mark Bowman was one of them, trying to toss this back on the Mets and how this is somehow the Mets' fault because, the 3rd game in this series was tacked on because of the postponement back in Citi Field way back when. And instead of having a mutual off day to make up that game, right, earlier in the season, the Mets chose to just put it toward the tail end of this 2-game set because somehow this was originally supposed to be a 2-game set between the Mets and the Braves. But you're telling me that the Mets foresaw there being a hurricane in the area and a postponement 6 months back, 5 months back? Give me a break here. Give me a break. So again, I know the Braves reporters and their fan base is going to spin this on the way that the Mets could have sidestepped this, but that's absolutely ridiculous. You got to miss me with that. I'm not buying into that at all. But yeah, I would expect, right? Maybe an announcement comes later today. Maybe the announcement comes early tomorrow. I would expect Sean Manaea is the starter tomorrow. Would expect David Peterson goes in game 2. And hopefully we're talking about 2 wins at that point, and Luis Severino can get the job done in game 3 for a sweep. So I appreciate you all being here. That's really the only thing I had. Again, the Mets record, 17 games up over 500, 87 and 70. Again, probably going to need to reach that 90 win mark in order to get into the playoffs. And would love to get there by the end of this weekend. And talking about a sweep against the Brewers, that's the best way for the Mets to get themselves into the playoffs. But we're going to be watching. We're going to be scoreboard watching. I'm going to be scoreboard watching. I know you guys are going to be scoreboard watching. And I'm pretty sure this team, whether they want to admit it or not, they're going to be scoreboard watching as well. But the consensus and the absolute fact is the Mets have to go out there and they have to perform. They have to put together competent at-bats. And this team has to play as a collective unit. You cannot afford the mistakes that you made in game 1 against the Braves, because good teams they'll take advantage of that. So we're talking about plays like the Francisco Alvarez running into Severino play and then Severino throwing it away to kickstart that brutal third inning. We're talking about Starling Marte throwing through the cutoff and allowing Ozzy Albies to advance from first to second for free. And then Ozzy Albies comes around to score with an extra run. We're talking about all of that. We're talking about the bullpen and Stanek coming in and automatically giving up a home run, right? And we're talking about this collective offense for them to finally, wake up. Pete Alonso, I know Rob's going to talk about it on his channel, so I'll spare you all the Pete Alonso talk, but he had a brutal game in Atlanta. He needs to step up. Brandon Nimmo needs to step up. This entire lineup needs to step up. No excuses for any single one of them. The time is now, and this core, with how many people in this fan base don't believe in this core, Rob talks about it all the time. He doesn't believe in this core. He doesn't believe in this core. A lot of other people. Is Pete Alonso going to show up because we don't believe in Pete Alonso? This is their time to show up. This is the best time to show up. And guess what? If the Mets sweep the Brewers, nobody's going to be talking about it, especially if the Mets go ahead and clinch in Milwaukee. So I want to get to that point. I want to stop talking about Pete Alonso because Pete Alonso is a New York Met, and we're going to root for him until the very end. I want to stop talking about Brandon Nimmo's struggles. I want to stop talking about JD Martinez's struggles. I want to see all of these guys prosper. As long as they're in a Mets uniform, I want to see them prosper. Go out there, show them what Mets baseball is all about. Shout out to my guy Darren in the chat here. Salute to you. Appreciate you being here. Again, a little bit of an early stream. I understand it's a Thursday. We're approaching 5 o'clock here. I went live at 4 p.m. I had a lot to talk about. We did a little bit of a preview. We went through almost all. I know I definitely missed some, but the scenarios that could present themselves with the Mets in Milwaukee and all these series that matter for the Mets, in San Diego with the Padres, in Atlanta with the Braves and the Royals. And as always, check out all the content on the channel. I hope that you all are enjoying the content. I appreciate you all that vote in the live chat poll. Get me to 1,000 subs, please. If you haven't subscribed yet, hit on that subscribe button. We talking Mets baseball. I'm going to try to go live at some point during this weekend while I'm in Milwaukee cheering on our New York Mets. Maybe I'll do like a little bit of a live stream from my phone after, hopefully a win is concluded on Saturday. Maybe I'll do like a live reaction from my phone. So again, if you don't have the channel notifications on, turn on the channel notifications. And again, let's come out of this weekend happy and prosperous and talking about a New York Mets team that is hopefully at the bare minimum 89-71, but at the absolute maximum and what we all hope 90-70, because that's the magic number in my opinion is 90 wins. Hit those thumbs up. If you haven't, subscribe. Usually live tweeting games at CPNYSports on X and Instagram. And make sure you all are checking out all the great content from every other content creator that's going live today and will be going live in future days to come. It's your boy CP. I appreciate you all spending your early or your late Thursday afternoons here on the channel. See you all again. Probably no content for me tomorrow because I will be on travel. I will be flying out to Milwaukee. But again, I appreciate you all stopping by. I'll see you all sometime this weekend. Peace.
Thank you for watching the True Mets Talk podcast. Make sure you're tapping on that notification